Hello everyone and welcome back to the One Code Cap channel. So now we're going to continue our Django tutorial series, and this is going to be part 2 where we're going to be discussing all about the model and the admin panel. So using models in Django, we're going to visualize how our data is going to look like and how we're going to manipulate it. So with this being used, we can now put in some dynamic data and do some small operations using the admin panel. So it's probably best to show you some examples. So we're going to start with one simple one. So this is going to be part 2 of the Django series. We're going to be talking about models and the admin. So let's go back to what we were able to do last time. We were able to create our own virtual environment and our very first project, along with showing the install work successfully screen that's going to be shown upon creating a Django project. But the thing is, now we need to be able to edit what's happening inside of this project and maybe put some dynamic pages or mess with some data that's going to be passed to this Django server. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a folder where we can put our files to be edited. And the best way to do that is to use this command. So much like the start project command used by Django Admin, we can also make use of start app to create some applications to connect to our Django server. So we're going to call this my first app. And we can see that much like the first project, we was also able to create a folder with the necessary Python files for putting everything that we need to edit this project, or at least connect one application. So let's try and look at all the files that are currently located in this folder. So a Django application is going to have these files. So we have the first one, which is migrations. And think of this as like save states or iterations of what your models are going to look like. I think it's going to be much easier to explain later on, so you could come back to that. And now we have this init.py as well, and that is for that's something that we don't need to get into right now, since this is for adding in some extra stuff to our project, but we're just going to stick with the basics to get everything started. We also have this admin.py as well, and this to check out the things that we put in this application and make it so that things are editable or accessible by admins or the developers. And these things or functionalities are not going to be accessible to a normal user or a normal client. We also have apps.py, and this is going to be like the metadata of this current application. So you can notice that whatever we named in the command is going to be the same in this app config. So we named it my first app, and it's going to be the same thing as well. And this starts with the big auto field. So this is just an ID. So it is defining an ID for the models that are going to be located inside this application. It's going to be assigned an ID by default. Then we also have this models.py. So we're going to be doing a lot of work in here for this episode. So we're going to come back to that. We also have tests in here in case we want to test out the functionalities of this application. Then we can put the necessary iterations to test for this application. And lastly, we have this views.py. So this would be similar to the pages to display or the routes to redirect to every time we want to do a certain functionality or a certain thing in the server. So let's go back to models. All right, so for our models, you can see at the very top here that we're taking from a library. So this first statement is called an import statement. So it's taking from the library of Django.db. So it's just indexing from this big Django library and just taking it from the DB section of that library. And we're importing a certain thing called models in order to do some model functionality. So the models, once again, are for creating the database and the information that's going to be passed around in this Django server. So the first thing we're going to do is take out this comment because we don't really need that. And now we're going to put in a new class. So this class is going to signify the first thing we're going to be putting inside of our application. So what kind of sector or what kind of collection are we dealing with for this application? And it's not only limited to one, but for now, we'll stick with one for simplicity's sake. And we're going to say this is a class of person, and it's going to be inheriting everything that's happening inside of the models.model. So what we did in this first line over here was we created a class, and we call it person, so we're dealing with a collection of people. And it's going to take from this models library, and underneath that is going to be a collection of model. And we could actually look into this in the base. And this model actually has a lot of data in here that you don't need to worry about, but we're going to be taking a lot of functionalities from this models.model to create our database or data structures. The next thing we're going to do is actually think of what the person is made of. So for an application, what we take from a person would normally be something like their name, their age, their gender. So you could try and implement those fields into this class. So you could say name is equal to models dot, and we could see a lot of these over here in the tooltip. And these are our choices in order to put a functionality for this. We actually call this a field, but this is probably pretty similar to maybe a variable in a lot of programming languages. But since this is a class, there's going to be a list of things that we want to associate with a person. So with a person, we have to associate a name with them, and a name would normally show up in a string or a text format. So you could say something like maybe my name. So we could say maybe something like these over here, Jared or John. Maybe those are applicable. And for that, instead of making something like models.string, because that's not one of the options for the Django.db, we could utilize a car field instead. And with the car field, it is best practice to add in a max length as well. So Django knows how much it has to allot for this field. So in this max length, we could say that it's probably just going to be 50. So it's going to be 50 letters in a name. So you could maybe support a full name, and maybe something like that. And that's probably going to be less than 50. Yep, that is less than 50 for the length. And it's just going to make it supported for longer names. And after that, we could also put in our age. So for our age, we could take from the models again. And from this long list of playable things that we have in the models library, we could say that models.integer field is something that we can take from. And this integer field also has a parameter. So you could say default. And this is going to be, if they don't enter something in this age, this will be the default that's going to be set for this field. So we could say the default is equal to 0. And lastly, we have the gender. So let's just rehash the car field for now. And let's just say a max length of 10. Maybe that'll do for now. Okay, so after doing this, we are now able to successfully create our very first model in our very first Django project. So now what do we do with this? Is it already upgraded or is it already updated on our server? Do we actually mess with this right now? So my answer to that is not yet, because this is currently just a normal Python file. The Django server doesn't actually know that this is already here. How do you make Django aware that this new model called person is actually existing? So we could go back to my first project. So in the Django project, we're going to have to come back here several times to put in some new things. But no worries, we could just follow the steps of it that I'm going to be doing. So we could go in here and we could see this list over here. That'll be the term for Python. It's actually called installed apps. So what we noticed a while ago was we did a start app command. So we could consider this my first app as an application we could put in our Django server. So in this, we could see a bunch of these Django default apps that are already included inside of this project. So we don't need to mess with those because this is just going to be the basics of the basics. And if we mess with these, we're probably going to break something. So let's just leave those alone for now. And at the very bottom here, we're going to be adding in one more thing. And we're just going to be using my first app. And we're going to be typing that in here as well, since that is the name of our application. So after putting that, now we can go back to our command prompt. And we could say py make migrations. So this is going to add a new migration. So we see this migrations folder over here. So this is basically going to save the progress that we did in our models.py and make it known that our Django server is going to be taking from this models file. So we're going to press enter on that. And we could see in here, max length must be a positive integer. So we could go back to the model and we could actually take these out because these are currently string and they're supposed to be integers. So let's try that again. Okay, so that's looking a lot better. So now we could say pymesh.py migrate. So once again, just like in the first episode, this migrate is going to be activating these models again because Django just knows that these exist, but these are currently in the current iteration or the current version of our server. So we got to activate that. So you could say migrate. And we could see that the migration that was made in here, you could actually see a new thing inside the migrations folder, is now activated and should be accessible in our Django server. So we could go back, and our py over here is actually already running our server, but if you forgot the command for that, you just do py manage.py run server, and you'll be able to see it on the Django page. So let's see what's happening in here. So we can see that nothing much has changed, and that's no worries because we actually didn't make any views yet or change anything from this template. We just put a random, or we just put this person model in here, and this has all the data that we need, but we haven't changed anything visually, so we're not going to see much changes right now as a client. And how do we actually see this model? Because we actually don't know where we could actually edit this or where could this have been placed. So there's going to be one more command that I'm going to be introducing. And this is going to open up the Django Admin, which is going to be a very vital tool that is going to be used for creating stuff in Django. So the first thing we're going to do is create a super user. So a super user is going to be someone that's going to have admin capabilities or responsibilities or permissions that are only accessible to those that have a higher hierarchy inside of this server creation or the roles for this Django server. So someone that has the permissions or someone that should be able to mess with big things that are happening inside of this project should be giving this super user. But since this is our own project, we should be able to use this super user to test out the capabilities and functionalities, or just check out our database to see what's happening with our debugging. So this is going to be plenty useful, and let's press enter and see what's happening in here. So we can see this username over here and leave blank to use, and that's my Windows name. So in your case, it's going to be the name that's assigned to your operating system. And for now, I'm just going to leave my username as admin, and email address is admin@admin.com. So it's going to be validating if it's a real email address, but don't worry, this doesn't need to be your real email address. It just needs to end with .com. It needs to have an at in the middle. And the password of this will be just short. I'm just going to make mine admin as well. And it's going to confirm it just so you know what kind of password you're putting in for your super user. And it's going to give me some validation. And you can actually bypass this since we're just going to be testing this out. And I want to keep the admin, so I'm going to bypass that validation. And now we created that super user. So the thing is, how are we going to be able to access this admin? So we can go back to our URLs over here in my first project, and we can see that our URL patterns over here has a thing called admin/. So if you're familiar with other kinds of web development libraries or web development frameworks, a path is going to be something like an address that's going to lead to a specific functionality or specific page inside of your web server. So in this case, we can see that we already have this path that has admin/, and it should have the routes accessible to an admin. So since we created a super user, and a super user is also the same as an admin, we can now use that super user to access these admin URLs over here that is already being served to us by default using Django. So we can go back to this, and we can just add in a /admin, and let's check out what's happening in here. So you can already see that there's already a username and password validation over here that we can use to check out the admin panel. So you can say admin in here, and the password I just did admin, and log in. And now we can see that this page has an authentication authorization group, which has groups and users. So this is, by default, the users that is already included with every Django project. You could just route the authentication through this user model. So we don't need to mess with that for now. We actually need to look for something that we made a while ago, and that is our person model. And we can notice that in this site administration over here, aka the admin panel, we don't actually see our person in here, and that might be a little confusing for a lot of people. And that's because we need to populate the admin.py as well to show the model inside of our page or in the admin panel. All right. So in order to do that, we just go to our admin.py, and we're going to be importing the model that we made. So we could say from .models. So .model is just going to signify in the same folder that we're in, look for a models file as well. And from that, we're going to be importing the person class that we made. So once that's done, we're going to say admin, which is going to be from line number 1. And that's going to be all the functionalities that we could do for the admin panel. And we could in here, not site, not register. So the admin.site is just the admin panel. And we could say that we're going to register a new model, and we're going to call it person. So now that's there. we can now check out our admin panel, and we could see that from the My First App application, we could see persons has been added successfully. So we could actually zoom in on this, click on that, and we could see that there should be a list of people in here, but we don't have any persons made yet. So let's try and add that real quick. Let's add a person, and I'm just going to fill this up really quick. All right. And I'll just say the gender will be female. And let's say save in here. All right. And we can see that our person object 1 has been created. So we're going to make that the name later on in case you don't want it to be a person object 1. And in here, we can see the information that they have. So it's the name, age, and gender of this person. And we can refresh, and we can see that that data is persisting and is being able to be displayed in our page. So you can save that, and that is your person model already being displayed inside the admin panel, and we are able to verify, add, update. Let's try updating it and say 54. And yes, that is successful. And we could even delete said person as well. You could say yes, I'm sure. And now that person has been deleted. So we're able to verify that all of the operations that we need to do for our database is successful in this admin panel. And we were also able to show this model that we made in Django. So we're going to continue this in the next part, and I'm going to go more in depth with the capabilities that are present to us with the model and the admin panel as well in the next episode. So stay tuned, and thank you so much for watching.